The Galactic Unity Training Center was not a place for weakness or hesitation. It was a giant floating base in deep space, orbiting no world, loyal to no planet. Recruits from every known species were sent there to train, to fight, and to prove their worth. Inside its massive walls, the rules were simple: obey orders, complete your tasks, and never question authority. For most cadets, these rules were clear. But when the first batch of human cadets arrived, everything began to change. Among them was a young man named Theo Miller. He didn't look dangerous. He wasn't the tallest or the strongest, and he spoke less than the others. But there was something in his eyes calm, silent, and unreadable. And that made some of the alien instructors uneasy, especially Commander Varnak of the Threxian Order. Varnak was known across many systems as a strict leader. His scales were dark green, his eyes burned like coals, and his voice was sharp like a blade. He had trained hundreds of warriors, broken the spirit of many cocky recruits, and he believed respect came from fear. That day, when the new cadets lined up for inspection, Varnak's eyes were already judging the humans. He didn't like how they stood not stiff enough. He didn't like how they breathed not controlled. And then he saw Theo, standing with relaxed arms, looking ahead, not afraid, not nervous, just there. Varnak walked slowly past each cadet, barking orders in his deep, rough voice. Every non-human cadet straightened up when he passed. Then he stopped in front of Theo. For a long moment, he just stared at the human boy. "You didn't salute fast enough," Varnak said coldly, his voice echoing across the training hall. Theo blinked once and gave a short nod. "Apologies, Commander. I didn't realize it was required at this stage." That answer, calm and steady, only made Varnak angrier. To him, this was defiance. He didn't care about protocol or timing. He cared that this human didn't fear him. He raised his hand and, without another word, struck Theo across the face with a loud, sharp slap. The sound bounced off the metal walls like a shot. Everyone froze. Even the instructors from other species stopped moving. The alien cadets, used to such displays, watched with curious eyes. But the humans were stunned. None of them expected it. And yet, the most surprising thing was Theo's reaction. Theo didn't flinch. His head turned slightly from the force of the hit, but he slowly turned it back and looked Varnak directly in the eyes. His face was calm, too calm. There was no fear, no pain, and no anger. Just silence. Varnak narrowed his eyes, expecting an outburst, maybe even tears or trembling. Instead, he saw something far more dangerous: control. Theo stood still for 3 seconds, not speaking, not moving. And then something changed. In one sudden, smooth motion, he stepped forward, grabbed Varnak's slapping arm by the wrist, and twisted it sharply behind the alien's back. The giant Threxian commander let out a growl of pain as Theo stepped behind him, using just the right amount of force to drop him to his knees. The entire training hall went silent again, but this silence was deeper, heavier. Theo leaned down and whispered something only Varnak could hear. And then, just as quickly, he let go and stepped back, standing straight once again as if nothing had happened. Security bots rushed in, red lights flashing around the corners of the hall. Other instructors yelled and barked orders, but Varnak didn't move. He slowly got up, rubbing his arm, his face now filled not with rage but confusion and something close to fear. "Stand down," he ordered the security units. His voice was quieter now, less sharp. Theo, still calm, raised his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. "Permission to speak, sir?" he asked. Varnak didn't answer. He simply turned and walked away, his mind racing. How did this cadet move so fast? How did he disarm him so easily, without drawing blood or causing injury? It was precise, controlled, and terrifyingly effective. The other cadets remained silent, watching Theo with new eyes. Some were impressed, others confused, and a few were frightened. As for the human cadets, they looked at Theo with awe. None of them had seen him fight before. They had no idea what he was capable of. And now, neither did anyone else. Later that evening, whispers spread like fire through the base. Recruits from different worlds talked about the incident, some in shock, some in disbelief. He made Varnak kneel, they said, with just one move. Some called it luck. Others said it was human trickery, but none could deny what they saw. And far away in the observation room, senior officers watched the replay over and over. They zoomed in, analyzed Theo's movements, and compared them with known combat forms. But they couldn't identify the technique. It was too fast, too clean, and that made them nervous. What else were the humans hiding? Meanwhile, in his private quarters, Varnak stared at the mirror, his pride wounded. He had led armies, conquered battlefields, and yet a young human cadet had brought him down without raising his voice. He clenched his fist, but not from anger. It was confusion. He didn't understand how it happened. And worse, he didn't know what to do next. This was more than just discipline or training. This was something different. Something human. The moment Theo stood still after the slap, the training hall felt like it had frozen in time. No one spoke, no one moved, and even the blinking lights above seemed slower than usual. It was in those silent 3 seconds that everything changed, not just for Theo, not just for Commander Varnak, but for the entire Galactic Unity base. Those 3 seconds didn't feel like hesitation. They felt like calculation, like something ancient waking up. Theo hadn't panicked, hadn't looked around for help, and hadn't shown pain. Instead, he stood as if he had already seen this moment in his mind and was now deciding what came next. The cadets, both human and alien, had no idea they were witnessing the beginning of a shift that would ripple through the galaxy. Varnak's slap had not just tested Theo's discipline, it had tested the limits of what anyone thought a human was capable of. And in those quiet seconds, the galaxy learned that humans were not just adaptable or clever, they were dangerous in ways others couldn't understand. Those 3 seconds were not an accident. They were control, patience, and quiet fury wrapped into a single, measured breath. As Theo twisted the Threxian commander's arm and brought him to his knees. No one could believe their eyes. The security systems had detected the motion, but by the time they activated, the moment was already over. It had taken just 3 seconds to erase the image of humans as fragile newcomers and replace it with something much more unpredictable. And that unpredictability was what frightened the observers the most. Theo hadn't used brute strength or technology. He hadn't even raised his voice. What he had used was something every species feared: skill combined with restraint. The galactic officers watching from above didn't see a disrespectful act. They saw an answer to a question no one had dared to ask before. What happens when humans are pushed too far? The reaction wasn't random. It was cold, efficient, and disturbingly professional. Someone trained him, but the question was who? Within hours, rumors had spread across every level of the station. From maintenance bots to battle-hardened captains, everyone had heard about the human cadet who made Commander Varnak beg for mercy. The Threxian warrior had been known to break bones just to teach discipline, yet he hadn't even tried to retaliate after standing up. That silence said more than any report. It said Varnak had seen something in Theo's eyes, something that told him fighting back was a mistake. And Varnak wasn't a fool. He had faced beasts with fire in their lungs and soldiers with no fear of death, but he had never seen a look like the one Theo gave him. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't pride. It was something worse. It was indifference. Theo didn't seem to care about punishment or recognition. He wasn't trying to prove anything. That scared people more than any weapon. Back in the human quarters, Theo sat alone. His face was marked from the slap, but he didn't touch it. His teammates watched him from a distance, unsure of what to say. Some were amazed, others were worried. One of the female cadets, Jenna, finally approached him and asked why he didn't fight back immediately. Theo looked at her for a moment before answering, because I wanted them to remember what happens after. That one line sent chills through the group. It wasn't said with anger or pride, it was just the truth. Theo hadn't reacted out of emotion. He had chosen the perfect time to move, and that choice meant something far bigger than a simple act of defense. It meant he had already calculated the consequences and accepted them. And that's when the others realized they weren't training with just another soldier. They were training with someone who had seen real war. The The station's higher command didn't know how to respond. Some wanted to expel Theo for violence, others wanted to promote him. But no one could deny what had happened. Commander Varnak refused to file a report, and that alone spoke volumes. Instead, he issued a private warning to all instructors: do not provoke the humans unnecessarily. That was the first time in Unity history that such a message had ever been sent. And it wasn't just about Theo, it was about what he represented. Humanity had always been underestimated. Their bodies were fragile compared to armored species, their senses weaker than many predators of space. But in Theo, the galaxy had seen the one thing that humans carried more than most: resolve. That quiet force inside them that waited, watched, and acted only when the time was right. In the following days, instructors began treating the human cadets differently. There were fewer insults, less yelling. Training sessions became more careful, more structured. Some alien recruits grew curious, others avoided them completely. But everyone kept an eye on Theo. They watched how he moved, how he listened, and how he never reacted unless absolutely necessary. And that made him even more mysterious. He trained harder than anyone else, but never showed off. He helped others, but never asked for help. He was always early, always focused. And most importantly, he was always watching. The station's analysts tried to predict his next move, but failed every time. Theo wasn't following a pattern. He was preparing. For what? No one knew. Varnak, meanwhile, couldn't sleep. He kept seeing those eyes, calm, unreadable, and terrifying. He kept replaying the moment in his mind, trying to understand how it happened so fast. The pain in his arm had faded, but the fear hadn't. And that fear began to spread to others, even those who had never met Theo. His name became a quiet warning in the halls. A legend was forming, not of a warrior, but of a shadow. Someone who didn't need weapons to win. Someone who could end a fight before it even started. And as the galaxy turned its gaze to this new generation of cadets, one thing became clear: those 3 seconds had changed everything. Not just for Theo. Not just for the training center. But for every species who thought humans were just another weak race in a galaxy full of monsters. No one knew where Theo had really come from. His file looked normal, born on Earth. Average childhood. Joined the Human Defense Academy at 17, top scores in tactics and physical training, but something about him didn't match that record. There was something hidden beneath his calm eyes and silent steps. After the incident with Commander Varnak, people had tried to dig deeper, but even the Galactic Intelligence Network found little more than empty gaps in his past. A few blurry photos, 1 or 2 redacted reports, and a classified mark stamped over his early training. Rumors began to grow among the cadets and even the officers. Some said Theo was part of a secret program. Others believed he had fought in a war humans weren't supposed to talk about. But no one dared ask him directly. There was a kind of stillness around him that made people hesitate, as if they could feel there was something dangerous just beneath the surface. Theo wasn't loud, didn't try to act like a leader, and never bragged. He just moved like someone who had nothing to prove, and that made him more powerful than anyone else around him. While other cadets trained to be soldiers, Theo trained like he was preparing for something darker. He moved with perfect control, studied more than what the academy assigned, and tested himself against systems not meant for cadets. He hacked into ship simulations, rewired drones to create unpredictable attack patterns, and even challenged strategy programs used by elite officers. No one stopped him because no one could prove he was breaking any rule. He always found a way to work in silence, like a shadow inside a machine. Instructors began observing him secretly, watching how he seemed to absorb every detail around him: the weight of footsteps in the hallway, the sound of security doors opening, even the delay between warning alarms and system responses. He wasn't just learning to fight, he was learning how to control a battlefield before the fight even began. And it was clear that someone had trained him to think this way, but that someone had erased their traces. One night, when the training center lights were dimmed and most cadets were asleep, a high backslash. Believed he was placed in the academy to observe others. Others said he was a weapon in disguise, sent to see how far the galaxy would push him before he was forced to show what he truly was. Whatever the truth, Everyone began treating him with a careful respect, as if they were walking near a sleeping beast. Theo's team, at first confused by the growing silence around him, slowly began to understand. They saw how alien commanders avoided eye contact with him now, how his name was spoken in whispers even among elite units, and how guards gave him just a little more space when he passed by. One of his teammates, a young Martian-born pilot named Kellen, once tried to joke about it. "What are you really, Theo? A ghost? A spy? Or just the galaxy's most boring badass?" Theo had simply smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. That unsettled Kellen so much that he never asked again. Even Jenna, the bravest among the group, stopped asking about his past after she noticed a strange scar behind Theo's right ear, one that didn't look human. It was faint, almost invisible, but curved like a symbol no one could recognize. She once tried to scan it with a med kit out of curiosity, but the scanner glitched and reset instantly. That was the last time anyone tried to learn about Theo's body. Then came the day of the deep space simulation, a test designed to push cadets to their limits. They were dropped into a digital battlefield with malfunctioning ships, limited oxygen, and hostile alien drones. It was meant to be impossible to win, only to measure how long they could survive. Most teams barely lasted 20 minutes. Theo's team, however, lasted 2 hours and 51 minutes, not just surviving, but completing objectives the instructors hadn't even programmed into the system. When the test ended, instructors reviewed the logs and found strange entries patterns no one had taught the cadets, codes rewritten in real time, enemy drones turning against their own. They thought it was a glitch until they checked the individual input logs. It was Theo. Every time something impossible happened, he had touched a console, spoken a line, or moved a control panel. He had turned the simulation into a war zone only he understood. One instructor simply said he changed the system from inside. Like he's done this before. That's when fear began to replace curiosity. Because people started wondering, what if he wasn't just trained? What if he was built for something? His reactions weren't just fast, they were perfect. His emotions didn't flare, they disappeared. His instincts weren't natural, they were too precise. Some believed Theo had been genetically modified, while others thought he had cybernetic implants no one could detect. But the most terrifying idea was the simplest. What if this is just what a human becomes when pushed beyond normal limits? Not a super soldier, not a machine, just a pure result of pain, war, and endless training. The kind of creation no alien species had expected, the kind they couldn't control. The Galactic Council received a private report after that simulation. It simply said the subject is active. Observation no longer possible. Recommend silence. No one knew what that meant. No one dared ask. But from that day, every alien officer who had once questioned human strength began to speak differently. They no longer called humans soft. They no longer joked about Earth's short military history. Instead, they spoke of potential, dangerous, hidden, and rising. And at the center of it all was Theo, the cadet who never raised his voice, never asked for attention, but who had revealed that within the quietest human could live a force the galaxy was not prepared to face. A force that didn't need weapons, didn't need orders, and didn't need anyone's permission to change the rules of war. Ever since that unforgettable incident with the alien commander, and the strange hidden power Theo had revealed during the simulation, everything in the academy began to change, but not in any way that could be explained in official reports. There were no announcements, no orders from above, and no sudden shifts in schedules. Yet every species at the Galactic Defense Academy started to act differently when humans were present. Aliens who once laughed openly at humans' short history of space travel now chose their words carefully. Senior officers from powerful empires who once walked past Earth cadets without a second glance now offered polite nods and, at times, even small signs of respect. But the change wasn't just about fear. It was something deeper, something uneasy that moved through the halls like a silent warning. They had seen something they didn't understand, and it had shaken the quiet confidence they had held for centuries. Theo had not only survived the slap from Commander Varnak he had ended it in 3 seconds, with no visible weapon, no loud threat, and no effort. And then he had gone back to standing still, as if nothing had happened. That moment had burned itself into the memory of everyone who had witnessed it. Now, they looked at humans differently. Before, humans were considered unpredictable, emotional, and weak. But now they were seen as something far more dangerous, calm, quiet, and hiding something no one could measure. The strange shift became more visible during the mixed-species combat drills. In the past, humans had always been assigned lower role support, defense, or observation. The higher command believed they lacked the raw strength or ancient war knowledge of older species like the Zarnak or the Threy. But after Theo's simulation performance, human cadets began getting promoted into leadership positions during these drills, sometimes without explanation. And every time they took charge, the results were undeniable. Missions succeeded faster, with fewer casualties and smarter tactics. Alien cadets who once refused to take orders from humans now followed them closely, though no one admitted why. It wasn't because humans had become stronger overnight. It was because there was now an unknown edge to them, and every alien cadet feared they might be facing another Theo, another calm, quiet face, hiding something that could break them in seconds. There were whispers in mess halls and training rooms. Phrases like, "Don't provoke the humans," and "You never know what they're capable of," passed between soldiers. Some began studying human culture more seriously, trying to find clues. Others requested transfer to stations where no humans were present. What had begun as a simple act of violence had grown into a quiet storm, changing the order of the academy itself. Even the commanders were affected. Council meetings that once ignored Earth's proposals now listened with care. Human officers, once kept at the edges of galactic strategy, were now invited to speak and offer advice. And though they didn't say it out loud, the reason was clear. No one wanted to make a mistake with humans again. They weren't just another species, they were now a potential threat, and possibly the most unpredictable one the galaxy had ever faced. The fear was not only in what Theo had done, but in what he represented. If one human cadet could carry that level of silent destruction, how many others were out there? How many humans, born from a planet of constant struggle, had that kind of will hidden inside them? And worse, how many of them didn't even know it yet? It was this question that haunted alien leaders. They began reevaluating their understanding of humanity, no longer comparing them to known enemies or allies, but placing them in a new category, unknown potential. For the first time, the Galactic Order had to face a species that couldn't be predicted by experience or history. The rules of galactic strength were changing, and humans were at the center of it. Theo himself never claimed any power, never boasted, never gave speeches. He continued to act like a normal cadet, attending classes, participating in drills, and avoiding unnecessary attention. But his silence only made him more powerful. People began to say that his calmness was a kind of armor, an invisible shell that made him untouchable. Even the aliens who had once called humans soft-fleshed or primitive began walking with caution around him. It wasn't long before other human cadets noticed the shift and, without trying, began carrying themselves differently too. They felt the new weight of the galaxy's attention on them, and instead of shrinking under it, they stood taller. Not with arrogance, but with a quiet pride, as if they finally understood what they truly were. They were not weak. They were simply misunderstood. And now that the galaxy had seen even a glimpse of what they were capable of, the balance of power was starting to move in a new direction. The shift reached a point when a three-general, a battle-hardened warrior known for never acknowledging other species, stood before a gathering of cadets and spoke the words no one expected to hear. "The humans have shown us something we cannot explain. Let us not provoke what we do not yet understand." Those words were repeated across stations, bases, and military circles. They were not seen as a warning, but as a truth. Respect, once forced, was now freely given. Fear, once hidden, was now shaping policy. And in the middle of it all was a human cadet with no known past, no military title, and no desire for attention. But every alien officer knew his name, and every command center had quietly updated their risk assessments for human interactions. Earth, the once laughed-at planet, had become a question mark that hovered over every military plan and diplomatic meeting. Galactic leaders, in their quiet chambers, began planning new strategies not to fight humanity, but to avoid. The silence in the Grand Assembly Hall was deeper than ever before. Leaders of over 70 alien species sat in their high-backed chairs, watching the human representatives step forward, not with pride or arrogance, but with calm confidence. It wasn't Theo. He had returned to Earth months ago, but his story had already carved a permanent mark across the galaxy. His name was now taught in military academies and whispered in alien war councils. This new human delegate was here for a reason no one could have imagined just a year ago, to formally propose a new structure for intergalactic cooperation, one that placed Earth not at the edge, but right at the center. The strange part was, no one objected. Once, the very idea would have caused uproar. Now, the most powerful empires listened without protest, their eyes focused, their thoughts racing. Theo's quiet act of defense had changed everything. It had shifted the way entire species looked at humanity. What was once seen as wild unpredictability had turned into a calculated fear, and that fear had grown into something much more complex, respect mixed with uncertainty. They didn't understand how one cadet could act with such speed and force. They didn't understand how a species with so little time and space could stand so tall against ancient empires. But what they truly feared, what haunted them in private thoughts, was the idea that maybe Theo wasn't special at all. Maybe he was just the beginning. Across space stations and command ships, changes had already begun. Humans were no longer kept in secondary roles. They were now commanders, strategists, and advisors to fleets that once ignored them. And even when humans gave simple orders, aliens followed them without question, not out of fear of punishment, but because they sensed that Earth had seen something no one else could. The stories of Theo's reaction, of the way he stood silent before and after disabling the commander, were told again and again. And every time, the story grew sharper, more precise, as if everyone was trying to understand the one question no one could answer. What exactly are the humans hiding? Because it was clear now that humans had something different, something that went beyond weapons or strength. It was in their minds, in their willpower, in the way they took pain and turned it into something dangerous. What had started as fear soon became caution, and that caution eventually gave way to influence. Now, humans were part of every major decision. Now, alien rulers waited to see Earth's position before casting their own vote. The balance had shifted, and it wasn't because of war, it was because of one moment. One slap. One reaction. 3 seconds. And then silence.as alliances began to reshape themselves. Old enemies started meeting through human mediation. Earth became the neutral ground where ancient wars were paused, if not forgotten. The reason was not that humans demanded peace, but that everyone feared what might happen if they didn't listen. Earth had become the invisible line no one wanted to cross. It wasn't that they expected humans to attack, it was worse than that. They didn't know what to expect. Humanity had become a puzzle. And now, no alien species wanted to be the one that tried to solve it by force. The mystery was too great. The cost was unknown. And so, the galaxy began to adjust itself around the new presence, not loudly, not in parades or ceremonies, but in small changes that mattered far more. Earth's voice was no longer small. It echoed in every star system. Its cadets were requested in every training facility. And its strategies were implemented even by those who didn't fully trust them. Because trust didn't matter anymore, not when fear and respect were enough to hold peace together. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Theo lived quietly. He didn't seek attention, didn't claim titles, and refused interviews. But the world knew. Every human knew what he had done. And though the government celebrated him in private meetings, they wisely avoided turning him into a hero. Because heroes come and go, but symbols last forever. Theo had become something else. A reminder to the galaxy that humans could not be measured by the same standards. That no matter how new they were to space, they came with something far older than technology and instinct to survive at any cost. And that instinct could change everything in just 3 seconds. New recruits from other species were now trained with one extra rule: if you face a human, never assume. The instructors didn't explain why, but the rule remained. Don't provoke. Don't underestimate. Don't forget what happened in that one simulation. As Earth's influence continued to grow, the question shifted from are humans dangerous to how far will they go if pushed. The galactic order was no longer balanced on power. It now balanced on the uncertainty of what Earth might become next. Some leaders feared it. Others quietly hoped to learn from it. But none denied it anymore. A new era had begun. Not because humans had forced it, but because the galaxy had seen a truth it could not unsee. Fear had turned into careful diplomacy. Mockery had turned into silent respect. And where once stood empires that ruled for thousands of years, there now stood one quiet, rising planet whose name was enough to make them hesitate. Earth didn't need armies to make this change. It only needed 3 seconds and a reason. That reason had come when a single alien commander made a mistake he would never forget. And in those short, quiet moments that followed, everything changed. Not just for Theo. Not just for humans. But for the entire galaxy. From now on, every species would think twice before provoking Earth. Because the message had already been written not in fire, not in war, but in silence, fear, and the quiet start of a new age. A new era had begun, and Earth was already standing at the center of it.